This is the Brazilian eye in the sky, the Embraer 145 ISR, Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance aircraft, which contains some of the most advanced electronic systems used today in modern warfare. With its powerful radars and sensors, this medium-sized platform can spot threats from hundreds of kilometers away, gather vital information, and simultaneously relay them to allied units in real time. This episode of Know Your Plane will focus on the military version of Embraer's successful regional jet series that is employed by the Brazilian, Greek, Mexican and Indian Air Forces. As a disclaimer, this video will cover the Embraer 145 ISR platform in general, but with a special focus on the surveillance aircraft model operated by the Brazilian Air Force. Included in this video are the history of the platform, a short explanation of its different variants, and the specifications of the aircraft and its electronic systems. The origins of the Embraer surveillance aircraft date back to September of 1990, when the Brazilian government established two major programs focused on the Amazon region. With land borders totaling over 11,000 kilometers, the Amazon is Brazil's strategic northern frontier, and with a size of 5 million square kilometers, consisting mostly of jungle and unpopulated territory, it's no wonder that monitoring the borders of the Amazon is a challenge for the Brazilian government. Elements that threaten the Brazilian sovereignty include active guerrilla groups based across the border and who are known to have stepped into Brazilian territory, the most notable case being the Colombian Revolutionary Armed Forces, and the trafficking of both drugs and weapons into Brazil. Equally important to the country is the monitoring and control of the enormous airspace over the region, the protection of the mineral resources under the Amazon forest against illegal exploration, and the protection of the jungle and its biodiversity against pollution, unrestricted logging activities, and most notably fires who have the goal of clearing the jungle for agricultural land. As a matter of fact, by the year of 1990, these activities that I just mentioned had already eliminated over 13% of the original Amazon forest, an area larger than France. In order to strengthen its sovereignty and tackle the issues previously mentioned, the Brazilian government established the CIPAM, Sistema de Proteção da Amazônia, or Protection System of the Amazon, together with another program called CIVAM, Sistema de Vigilância da Amazônia, or Surveillance System of the Amazon. One measure of these two programs included the installation of several radars across the forest to improve monitoring capabilities over the Amazon. However, because of the size and the lack of infrastructure in the area, it just wasn't viable to install enough radars to cover all the airspace over the forest. Moreover, these radars did not have the capability of detecting aircraft at altitudes under 10,000 feet, which proved to be another issue since the aircraft involved in drug and weapon trafficking usually fly just over the treetops. In order to detect these low-flying aircraft and cover the airspace beyond the range of ground-based radars, the Brazilian government ordered special modifications of existing Air Force aircraft that were supposed to patrol the skies over the forest. In the year of 1994, the government decided that in addition to the capability of monitoring and controlling the airspace, this special aircraft was also to monitor the forest in search of pollution, illegal activities, and collect data for scientific research purposes with the goal of developing better policies for the region. The chosen aircraft was the nimble Embraer 120 Brasilia, who was employed by the Brazilian Air Force as a light transport aircraft. During preliminary studies for the necessary modifications of the Brasilia, it was noted that the equipment required was too heavy for the lightweight plane. Actually, the Brazilian Air Force would need 3 Brasilias in order to carry all the weight of the equipment. One of the most important pieces of the equipment was the Swedish active electronic scanning radar PS-890 AREI, who had been chosen for the CIVAM and was meant to be carried by a small aircraft. But with the Brasilia being too light, the Air Force began studying possibilities for the deployment of a Boeing 727 attached with the Swedish radar by the end of 1994. The platform of choice for the AREI radar had not been decided by 1996. In that year, Embraer flew the long-range version of its regional jet series, the ERJ-145LR, which had a range of 3,000 kilometers. Given the success of Embraer's civilian jet and the fact that Embraer had knowledge of the military program since the Embraer Brasilia was initially the platform of choice, in 1997 the Embraer ERJ-145 long range was chosen as the platform of the Swedish Area Raider in the Sivan program. The new aircraft was to be known as the Embraer 145SA surveillance aircraft and featured several modifications which we will talk about further along the video. In total, the Brazilian Air Force ordered 8 aircraft. 5 Embraer 145SA, whose Sony Ericsson PS890 Area Raiders were all purchased in 1998, and 3 Embraer 145RS remote sensing aircraft. The remote sensing variant has a different radar under the aircraft that is meant for acquiring data of ground targets and collecting information about the terrain. The first Embraer 145SA prototype flew on May 22, 1999, and the first remote sensing prototype flew on December 18th of the same year. Despite some initial delays, the first batch of 3 aircraft was delivered to the Brazilian Air Force in July of 2002. Upon officially entering in service, the surveillance aircraft variant was assigned the name R99A, while the remote sensing variant became known as the R99B. However, there were some changes in the designation of the Brazilian Air Force in June of 2008, and since then, the surveillance aircraft became known as the E-99, while the remote sensing variant became the R99. By the end of 2003, the remaining 5 aircraft had been delivered to the Brazilian Air Force, and all Embraer 145 ISR aircraft have since then been based at the Anápolis Air Force Base, where they are flown by the Guardian Squadron. Up to this day, the military version of the Embraer 145 is an essential asset for the Brazilian Air Force's effort in monitoring and controlling the Amazon and the borders between Brazil and its western neighbors. Frequently working together with the E-99 are also the E-29 Super Tucanos, who often perform interception of suspicious aircraft detected by the E-99, which in turn has a responsibility of overseeing the whole interception process. Usually, the interceptions are successful in making the small aircraft carrying drugs or weapons land, but there have been a few cases in interceptions controlled by the E-99 where the Super Tucanos had to fire warning shots, like in this case, or even shot down the non-responding aircraft in some more extreme occurrences.
Landing gear. Landing gear.
Aeronave interceptada, Charlie Papa 1424. Usted está desobedeciendo las instrucciones de la defensa aérea. La aeronave a tu lado está armada y autorizada a usar su armamento para obligarte a cumplir las órdenes recibidas.
Apart from the 8 Embraer 145 ISR aircraft currently in service with the Brazilian Air Force, Embraer has also exported its ISR platforms to 3 other countries: Greece, Mexico, and India. These countries all operate different or modified versions of the aircraft. The specifications for all these different models go beyond the scope of this video, but here's a short story on all of them. Greece ordered 4 aircraft in 1998, and they are a modified version of the Embraer 145SA, known as the Embraer 145H Hellenic. These aircraft have upgraded electronics and were all delivered in 2005. One notable mention of this aircraft service with the Greek Air Force is that it participated in NATO's operation against Libya in 2011 by identifying targets and controlling aircraft from France and Qatar in patrols, interceptions, and attack missions. Mexico purchased 3 aircraft in March of 2001, including 1 Embraer 145SA and 2 maritime patrol versions to fight against drug trafficking in the south of the country and to protect Mexico's strategic areas. The aircraft were all delivered in 2004, and since then they have been integrated with Mexico's SIVA, Integrated Air Surveillance System. Last but not least is India, which has purchased 3 aircraft equipped with a refueling probe in 2008. The Indian aircraft are to be fitted with India's own electronic equipment. The first flight of the Embraer 145I was on December 7th of 2011, and the first aircraft arrived on the following year for system integration with the Indian Air Force. I should also mention that Embraer, in partnership with Lockheed Martin, had won the bid for the Aerial Common Sensor program from the American military in 2004. According to the program, Embraer was supposed to supply a total of 57 aircraft to both the US Army and Navy. However, the American military cancelled the program where the Embraer aircraft would substitute the RC-12 King Air, the RC-7 or Dash 7 from the Army, and the EP-3 Ares II from the Navy. With all these different operators mentioned, let's perform a very quick explanation on the different variants of the aircraft. At first, we have the Embraer 145SA surveillance aircraft, whose only operators are the Brazilian and Mexican Air Forces. 5 aircraft have been manufactured for Brazil, where the aircraft are known as the E-99, and 1 airframe was sold to Mexico. The most remarkable features include the area radar mounted on the top of the fuselage and some additional antennas mounted on the tail. The next aircraft is the Embraer 145H, an improved version of the surveillance aircraft with an upgraded area radar, data link compatible to NATO standards, and flare and chaff dispensers. Greece currently operates 4 of these aircraft, which belong to the 380th Squadron. The Indian Air Force purchased 3 Embraer 145I fitted with a refueling probe. This variant is based on the surveillance aircraft model, however all of its electronic equipment comes from India's Defense Research and Development Organization. Another aircraft is the Embraer 145RS remote sensing, which is operated exclusively by the Brazilian Air Force and is also known as Multi-Intel. With its synthetic aperture radar and multispectral imager, it can produce topographic maps, conduct research on natural resources, analyze the soil and subsoil by its reflexivity, and even determine if the vegetation is healthy or not by measuring the absorption of chlorophyll from the air. The last version of the Embraer 145 is the Maritime Patrol aircraft, whose name is self-explanatory. This aircraft was initially developed for the Brazilian government. However, due to changes in the requirements which asked for a 4-engine aircraft with internal weapons bay, the Embraer 145 Maritime Patrol was discarded by the use of the Brazilian Navy. Mexico is the only operator of this variant, having acquired 2 aircraft. Now that we've briefly talked about all the variants, let's take a closer look on the surveillance aircraft used by the Brazilian Air Force. The E-99 has almost the same dimensions as the civilian Embraer 145LR. Height and length are the same, 6.75 and 29.87 meters respectively. However, the E-99 is 96 centimeters wider than the civilian plane at 21 meters, thanks to the addition of winglets which improve the endurance and flight time. It is worth pointing out that the E-99 was Embraer's first aircraft to feature winglets. Amongst its notable modifications, the E-99 has strengthened joints between the fuselage and the wings to accommodate the mounting of the area radar and eliminate the risk of shaking or vibrations, which could result in inaccurate readings from the radar. The radar is mounted at an angle of 6 degrees because during patrols, the aircraft's flight profile is pointed slightly up in order to improve range and endurance. Therefore, in these conditions, the radar is pointed to the horizon. Compared to the civilian version, you can also see the addition of several fins throughout the aircraft, with many of them working as antennas for the aircraft's electronic systems. Also note the lack of windows on the mid to rear fuselage. That's where the data processing computers are located. Now let's move to the interior of the aircraft. Behind the cockpit of the E-99, there is a galley and a resting area that can accommodate up to 5 people that are not involved with the operation of the aircraft or its electronics. The next section of the plane consists of 3 interchangeable consoles where the 3 operators would work. After that, we have the electronic equipment, including the processing computers, and going towards the rear of the aircraft you can see these 6 rectangles. They are actually 6 fuselage fuel tank cells which add a total of 2,405 liters to the fuel capacity of the plane. Finally, at the rearmost part of the aircraft we have a lavatory and a baggage compartment. For a regular mission, the E-99 consists of the 2 pilots, 1 tactical coordinator, 1 electronic warfare operator, and 1 intercept officer, therefore a total of 5 people. However, the book I've read mentions that usually the mission crew is 8, so you can add some 3 aircraft or electronic equipment technicians to the total. The power plant of the E-99 consists of 2 Rolls-Royce AE 3007 turbofan engines, the same engines used by the civilian Embraer 145 family. Therefore, the performance of these aircraft is largely the same. The maximum cruise speed of the E-99 is Mach 0.78 and its service ceiling is of 37,000 feet. But the maximum performance of the E-99 doesn't translate to its operation. In order to save fuel and maximize endurance, the E-99 flies at around 170 knots or 314 km per hour at an altitude of 30,000 feet when patrolling the skies. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get information on the endurance nor the range of the E-99, but I would estimate a range between 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers given the extra fuselage tanks. One notable feature worth mentioning is that the military versions of the Embraer 145 have a more powerful APU to handle all the electronic equipment and improved navigation system both by GPS and inertial navigation. When talking about the electronic systems of the E-99, obviously our main focus is the Ericsson microwave systems, now part of Saab, PS890 Area active phase array Doppler radar antenna mounted on the top of the fuselage. The Swedish radar provides early warning and can detect air targets up to distances of 500 km with a scan rate ranging from 3 to 12 degrees per second. The system can also detect small and slow aircraft such as aircraft involved in drug trafficking, flying at speeds under 108 km per hour up to distances of 450 km. According to the material I've read, the area detection envelope consists of 500 km to the side of the aircraft and 269 km to its front or back. Flying at high altitude, the area detection area is over 500,000 square kilometers horizontally and 20 kilometers vertically. The area radar can also detect naval targets up to distances of 350 kilometers, but this limitation is due to the angle of the plane with the horizon, because unlike some people might say, Earth is not flat. The system also comes integrated with a Mark 10 IFF capable of identifying targets up to 450 kilometers away. In total, the radar system is capable of tracking 300 targets simultaneously, while the E-99 can at the same time effectively control 6 interceptions, usually performed by the Super Tucanos in the case of the Brazilian Air Force. But to say that the E-99's capabilities are limited to long-range detection and airspace monitoring would be an understatement. Adding to its powerful radar, the aircraft also features an advanced communications exploration system capable of detecting, locating, triangulating, and recording communications transmitted on the frequencies between 2 MHz to 16 GHz. These communications can also be transmitted to other aircraft in real time with a secure data link connection via VHF or UHF with the aid of frequency hopping techniques. Air-to-ground communications are also possible, and the E-99 takes advantage of several ground stations located throughout the Amazon which connect the E-99 to the CIVAN's General Coordination Center in Brasilia. Now, even though the E-99 has state-of-the-art electronic equipment on board, I want to make it very clear that the E-99 does not have jamming equipment or jamming capabilities. On the contrary, the E-99 is very resistant to enemy jamming. All in all, the E-99 is a modern platform capable of providing early warning and detection, airspace management, and collection of intelligence. Adding to the advantages of this plane, the E-99 has a very short time in between sorties, just roughly 20 minutes, and perhaps more importantly, it is an affordable option. Coming from the commercially successful Embraer 145 series of regional jets, the entire 145 ISR platform shares low operational costs coupled with reduced inspection frequency and ground time, which allows the aircraft to fly over 3,000 hours annually, which is over 8 hours per day every day of the year. To give you an idea on the operational costs of some AWACS aircraft currently in service, I found the following data on the hourly cost of each aircraft. but please take these numbers with a grain of salt. The E-2 Hawkeye from the US Navy reportedly costs about $3,000 per hour, the EC-130 over $3,500, and the E-3 Sentry about $8,000, and according to the same source, the E-99 would cost less than $2,000 per hour. However, this is not to say that the E-99 is the cheapest AWACS aircraft in regards to acquisition and operational costs, because there are also turboprop AWACS aircraft, including the Saab 340 from the Swedish Air Force that is also equipped with the area radar. To conclude our video, the Embraer 145 ISR family includes some of the most advanced military aircraft in operation today and are a good option for medium-sized countries who either can't afford or don't need a large AWACS aircraft. Instead, they can count on an affordable and versatile plane to act as their eye in the sky that is capable of airspace monitoring and management, maritime patrol, anti-submarine warfare, remote sensing, and intelligence collection, coupled with the optional in-flight refueling. As always, sources are in the description, and I'd like to thank my patrons who helped me buying the one and only book written about this plane. Hope you have enjoyed this video, and see you next time.